Alright guys, in today's video what I wanted to do is take a little bit of time here to talk about the next couple of months when it comes to the PlayStation 4 and what it means for the PlayStation 5. Now I want to focus on the game releases, more specifically Final Fantasy VII Remake launching in April, and then the month after that we have The Last of Us Part 2 launching in May, and then in June we have Ghost of Tsushima launching. Now, not only do I want to focus on the fact that this is awesome for PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 4 Pro owners, anybody who's looking forward to some great games, seems there's going to be no shortage there, but I also want to focus on the fact that The Last of Us Part 2 specifically and Ghost of Tsushima are launching so close to one another, and I want to ask the question, is this a good thing, or could it potentially even be a bad thing? And if it is a bad thing, why would it be a bad thing, and why would Sony choose to do this? I think it just creates an interesting conversation there that I haven't really taken much time to talk about, and so we're going to go over all of this. But before going any further, if you could do me a favor, be sure to hit the like button on the video. It really helps it out, and make sure you hit the subscribe button as well. But we know that in April, Final Fantasy VII Remake is going to be launching on the 10th, and it's going to be an absolutely massive game. There are a lot of people who are extremely excited to play this game. I played the demo myself, and I did actually thoroughly enjoy it. It may have convinced me to actually pick it up and make Final Fantasy VII Remake the first Final Fantasy game I ever play. But it's going to be huge for PlayStation and its fans, and I think it's going to sell incredibly well. But you look to the next month, and we know that The Last of Us Part 2 is going to be launching on May 29th. Now, I have seen some people asking the question, is The Last of Us Part 2 going to suffer another delay? While anything is possible and anything can happen, I don't think that's likely. I do believe the game will retain that May 29th launch date, and it will, in fact, not be getting delayed. But you also have to look at Ghost of Tsushima, and you have to ask yourself, why is Sony choosing to release Ghost of Tsushima so soon after The Last of Us Part 2? Now, this is where people, I think, have different opinions. To some people, giving The Last of Us Part 2 an entire month before they launch Ghost of Tsushima is more than enough time. And I would argue that it doesn't really matter what launches around The Last of Us Part 2, because The Last of Us Part 2 is such a massive game. It's such a juggernaut of a game that I believe it really doesn't matter the company it's surrounded by. It's going to dominate, and it's going to do extremely well regardless. And so my real concern at this point is honestly with Ghost of Tsushima. I'm not going to lie. I do worry that maybe Sony choosing to launch the game on June 26th, less than a month after The Last of Us Part 2 is released, maybe is putting it too close to such a massive game. And I guess my real concern is Sony kind of getting in their own way. I've actually listened to the most recent Sacred Symbols podcast, and I believe it was Colin Moriarty who brought this topic up, and that's really kind of what sparked my mind to think about it, where he believes that Sony having Ghost of Tsushima launch so close to The Last of Us Part 2 or so soon after is a sign that they don't have much confidence in the game. And that's kind of disappointing to me, because I really don't want to believe that. I'm not saying that it's not possible, because of course it is. I don't know that much about Ghost of Tsushima. I know as much as anybody else does. And I want to believe that the reason why Sony is choosing to do this is not because they aren't confident in the game, but it's really because they're trying to clear the way for the PlayStation 5. At least that's what I want to believe, because something I can't help but notice is, well, I'm sure everybody notices this at this point, is how quiet Sony has been when it comes to talking about next generation in general. They have been very quiet. They're continuing to be quiet, and we are halfway through March, and it's really difficult to determine if we're going to get any more significant information on the PlayStation 5 this month. We have no idea if Sony plans to talk about it in April, May, or June. You can only assume they're going to, but they might not. As crazy as it may sound, Sony might not start talking about the PlayStation 5 until maybe even July. I mean, it would definitely catch people off guard, but this is where I'm just trying to figure out how everything's going to play out. Now, my real concern about Ghost of Tsushima is not necessarily that Sony doesn't have confidence in it, but it has more to do with the fact that The Last of Us Part 2 is such a massive game. It's such a huge game that it's going to command people's attention, and it's going to demand it, and it's going to get it. And I am very excited for The Last of Us Part 2, and even I'm a little bit concerned that I'm going to be so engrossed with this game, right? I'm going to be so infatuated with it for probably quite some time after it launches that I hope it doesn't interfere with my excitement for Ghost of Tsushima. Now, there has actually been a decent amount of people that I've seen on my channel who have said that they're actually more excited for Ghost of Tsushima than they are The Last of Us Part 2. But even with that being said, there's no doubt in my mind that The Last of Us Part 2 is the biggest game launching within this time frame. And I guess all I'm trying to get at here is I hope Sony is not making potentially a mistake by allowing Ghost of Tsushima to launch so soon after The Last of Us Part 2, because even though most people are going to complete the game relatively quickly, I just have this feeling that people are going to be talking about The Last of Us 2 for quite some time after it launches. And I just can't help but shake this feeling that it's going to interfere with the marketing potentially, or the overall excitement for Ghost of Tsushima, and it could potentially get in its way. Now, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out, because I could be completely wrong. Again, I want to believe that the reason why Sony is doing this is because they just want to create a clear separation where this is how they're ending the PlayStation 4's life cycle, and they're making way for the PlayStation 5. And once they start talking about the PlayStation 5, they're going to be talking about next generation games. And The Last of Us Part 2, Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Ghost of Tsushima, they are not next generation games, they are current generation games. And so with that being said, even though they will be playable on the PlayStation 5, and even though they probably will get upgrades on the PlayStation 5 for those who want to play it on that console, I don't think that they want those games to be the main focus when they talk about next generation and when they're talking about PlayStation 5 exclusives. I could be wrong about that. I definitely could be, because again, Sony could talk about the PlayStation 5 before the end of this month. They could talk about it next month. And I guess we just really don't know how big of a role these games are going to play in the conversation that is the PlayStation 5. Are they going to be marketed alongside the PlayStation 5, or is Sony really trying to create a separation here? Because I honestly expected Ghost of Tsushima to launch, in September. That's still summer, right? And I guess my worry at that point would have been, well, how are they going to do that without creating conflict with the PlayStation 5, considering it will be so close to the launch? So maybe Sony determined that if you have to choose between launching Ghost of Tsushima closer to one of your other big games versus launching it close to your new console, I will say that I do believe it makes more sense to launch it closer to another one of your big games, because, again, most people will already have beaten The Last of Us Part 2, but the question then becomes, are people going to be talking about Ghost of Tsushima, or is the conversation going to be dominated by The Last of Us Part 2, or potentially even Final Fantasy VII Remake, depending on how that, all plays out? And so, yeah, I just thought that this was a really interesting question that was kind of brought to my attention, and I realized that I don't really know exactly how to feel about it. I think that regardless, it is extremely exciting for PlayStation fans to know that you have so many games to look forward to in such a short period of time. And I think it's going to be difficult for most people to balance how much time they're going to have to play these games if they plan to play all of them. And for some people, it's going to come down to the decision, which game are you going to end up buying, because some people are going to be limited in how many games they can buy in such a short period of time. So, having a problem like this, in my opinion, is a good problem to have, but it does make you wonder what's going to happen to Ghost of Tsushima. And I guess at this point, I really want to know what you guys have to say about this. Do you think that Sony could potentially be making a mistake by launching Ghost of Tsushima so soon after The Last of Us Part 2, knowing how big that game is going to be? Or do you think that there's really nothing to worry about and that everything is going to be fine and they're both going to have more than enough room to breathe and spread their wings and do their thing? I will be very interested to see what you guys have to say. But that's going to do it for the video. Again, be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments below. Leave the video a like if you did enjoy it. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the bell notification icon so you never miss an upload, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.